where you are in your life journey at the moment.
I used to go from making $200K, I think in my last year of work, to basically zero.
Tell me about what made you decide to leave the corporate environment.
My husband and I were on a walk and I looked at him and I said, I'm not happy at work. Like, I don't want to do it. I felt like I was constantly proving myself to my family. I never turned down an opportunity to do what they were doing. So it kind of forced me out of my comfort zone a whole lot.
What is one thing that you wish you had known before you left?
Just how good it could feel. I just got 3 investors and an SBA loan approved, and I'm about to sign a lease on a building. It's breathing new life into me.
Welcome back, Wayfinders. I'm Vanessa Juby, your host for 101 Ways Out. Today, you're going to meet Devon Brown, who is opening a premier dog park in Chicago called Zoomies. It has not been an easy journey. You're going to learn a little bit about that in here, but you're also going to hear what inspired her to take action and how she got to that breaking point. You'll also hear how the support of having the right partner helps your dreams come true and helps you stay on that path. All of that's covered here and a lot more. But I want to also share a little bit more about Zoomies because it is such a cool concept. Not only is it an indoor dog park, it's also a cafe, a bar, a place where your little ones can get their little nails trimmed and get groomed, and they can make new furry fluffy friends while you work. It's such a cool concept, and it's coming to life this summer. Check out Devon, learn about her story, get amped up, and inspired to follow your dreams. Like, subscribe, and share. And I'll see you soon.
All right. I'm so excited. All right. So let's just start by you sharing who you are and where you are in your life journey at the moment.
My name's Devon Brown. I live in the north suburbs of Chicago. I've been here going on 8 years, moved around a whole lot before that in my life. I think I've actually lived longer in Chicago than anywhere else in my whole life. But I am an aspiring entrepreneur. I spent about a decade in corporate America leading big projects, and just this past year or a year ago, left my job to start a business. And so I've been doing that for about 12 months and am starting to get some really exciting traction. I'm married and I live here with my husband and my 2 dogs.
Oh, fantastic. I love it. Okay. You're early on your journey. And I think it's super exciting because in the process of recording these things, I've met folks that are just about to leave, right? Yeah. They put in their notice and their bosses are like, no, please stay with me. And so like, okay, well, I'm making my plan. And then I talk to people that are years into their journey. And so it's just so nice to have that spectrum of experience and lived experience. Yes.
Yeah. I feel like the time that I'm in right now is like a really, really interesting one because it's like, it's that limbo in between. Yeah.
Yes. Awesome. Okay. So start by sharing what your upbringing was like. Like what was it like when you were little? What were your parents like? Take us there.
I spent a lot of my like much younger years actually living in St. Louis, Missouri. And it was very idyllic, very charming. We lived in a neighborhood with like a bunch of kids. And it was a nice neighborhood where we could bike around, rollerblade, like very safe. But I have 2 older brothers, so I'm the youngest of 3 and only girl. So I got the princess brand very early on. Very typical upbringing, I would say. My dad worked in a big company. He was like doing the corporate thing. My mom was more or less a stay-at-home mom. Like she dabbled. She was like very involved in her junior league and whatnot. But I guess I would say I was bullied a lot in elementary school. So not all rainbows and unicorns, but like in the grand scheme of things, it was a really great childhood. Like fireflies in the summer, awesome trick-or-treating at Halloween. Yeah.
That sounds like my kid's life right now.
Yeah. I mean, it's great. Yeah. And then I moved around like starting from 4th grade on. So things got a little bit tumultuous after that. Not necessarily in a bad way, but like what started off as a very wholesome bubble-esque type childhood, like very quickly changed after 4th grade.
What made you guys move around?
So my dad's job initially so we moved to France when we moved in 4th grade. So we lived in Paris. And that was like obviously a really incredible experience, even at that age. But we moved there because of my dad's job. And then actually about 2.5 to 3 years after we moved there, he got laid off. And so we no longer had the means to stay there. And so we moved to Colorado. And we lived in a small mountain town in Colorado for about 2 years. And my mom could tell just by the way my older brothers were turning out, that like living in a small mountain town was not going to be good for us. Like there's nothing to do but get in trouble.
Yeah.
And so that was becoming evident. So my mom and I actually moved back to France just on our own volition. I spent 4 years there going to high school.
Okay, I was going to ask how old you were when you moved back. What about your brothers? Did they stay with your dad?
So they were both old enough at that point to be out of the house. Yeah. I mean, I've been doing kind of in conjunction with leaving corporate America, I've also been doing a lot of spiritual work.
Yeah.
I would say growing up, I would not consider myself a spiritual person. Once upon a time, I used to like think that was super weird. I didn't grow up religious either. So I was like very much an atheist, believed in science hardcore. And I have like, it started with reading The Secret probably back in college, and then had like that planted the little seeds and ever since. But in the past 12 months, more specifically, I've been like really deepening into my practices, and some of that is inner child work. And oh my God, I cannot visit my inner child without sobbing. It's
Yes.
so uncomfortable, but like probably good, I think.
I think it's fantastic. I love that you're doing that. I think it's so, so important. I can't imagine there's a person on this earth that doesn't have something that their inner child probably needs. But for people that have had parents that are not accepting of who they are at their, and then are trying to, I think what you're doing is so beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. I guess let me ask you just one last question, and then we'll move into what your corporate career and corporate life have been like. On the inner child stuff, for anyone that's listening to this that is unfamiliar with that, is there anything that you could share in terms of how to go, like how to learn more, or what you found? How did you find it, and has it helped you so far?
Oh gosh. So inner child work is probably one of the things I've done the least. I do a lot more like meditation, journaling. I went on an ayahuasca retreat in Costa Rica.
What?
Kind of a like mind-blowing face melt.
Thumbs up or thumbs down?
I would say thumbs up. I mean, I've done a lot of hard things in my life. That might have been the hardest thing I've ever done, but also the most like liberating, I guess. So with inner child work, I think it's easier when you have somebody guiding you, but generally speaking, it involves like picking a memory and then like closing your eyes and sort of trying to get back to that place. And you're not necessarily inhabiting your younger self, but you're actually like an adult present in the scene. And you basically like approach your younger self. Oh my God, it's going to make me cry. I'm like pseudo doing it right now. But like you look at them and you tell them like everything's going to be okay. And you like give them a hug. And typically you're like going back to a scene that's like maybe more painful and comforting them in a way that you didn't get comforted at that time. And when I was actually at my ayahuasca retreat, one of the nights, because it's 4 nights that you take this medicine, and it's 7 hours each time, and you're laying in the dark and it's just you and your thoughts and the medicine. But I also had a moment in that where I made a promise to my inner child to like always take care of her. And that was like incredibly healing. And I think as a child, I trust my adult self. And I had to like kind of come to that too, because I think with all this stuff with my parents, I stopped trusting myself and like what I was capable of. And taking care of my inner child, taking care of my 2 dogs. There are people who depend on me, and I haven't let them down yet. So
yeah, so you're a very trustworthy person.
I think so. I mean,
capable.
It's funny. So my first night of the ayahuasca ceremony, so you're laying on this mattress and there are other people present. So like we were in, I think it's like a palapa is what you call it. It's like a round room with like a thatched roof, and like the walls it's just screened in basically. And we could hear the ocean that was like a couple 100 feet away. And there are candles, or I mean, they're like electric candles, because you don't want to be tripping and like literally tripping or psychologically tripping and lighting everything on fire. But there's candles, it's dark, they play music. It's a fucking really cool experience. But the first night, there was a point where I had to use the bathroom, and I'm like deep in the medicine. I don't know if you've ever taken hallucinogens, you know what this is like, but ayahuasca is like, I mean, way more intense than acid or mushrooms. But I had to use the restroom. And so I signaled to the facilitator that I needed to go. And we went to the bathroom. Doesn't seem like a big feat if you're like just like a sober person, but in the medicine, I went and I laid back down on the mattress after using the bathroom and I cried because I was like, this girl gets shit done. Like she gets her needs met. I was so proud of myself. Like crazy. Yeah.
That'd be so freaking amazing if we just celebrated all of the things in our life like that.
I went to the bathroom when it was inconvenient. Yeah.
Yes. I helped my kids clean up a milk nest just a minute ago. Hell yeah.
Good for you.
Yes, thank you.
And you probably didn't lose your cool.
That's right. I didn't. I was a very nice mom. And I taught him about taking care of things and how to move the towels into the washing machine and why that matters. I was so nice.
That's awesome. Yeah. See, my dad, if you spilled a glass of milk, he would like fly off the handle. Like, as if you did it on purpose. Like, I think we all probably grew up with some millennial parents have to be just a 180 from like the kind of parenting we received growing up.
I totally agree with you. I'm like, we're doing all of the hard healing work. Thank goodness. I mean, I do feel a little bad. Like there are moments where I feel resentful. And there are lots of moments where I'm similar to you doing all of that inner child work and like, oh gosh, I'm really helping myself. Look what a good mom I am to myself and all that stuff. Yeah. But I still also feel bad for her, because she didn't have what she needed when she was a kid to be where she is. And she also didn't do the work to kind of figure it out. But I think mental health has come a long way in the last generation, Trying to keep all of that in perspective can be difficult.
Yeah. I mean, is it weird to say though, that this is going to maybe come out wrong, but I'm actually kind of glad for the upbringing that I had because I feel like it made me stronger.
Yeah.
I know that there was a lot of armor that I had to shed for sure, but in terms of resilience and like ability to withstand discomfort and like, I don't know, I feel like to some extent, if you're only always validated and like made to be right, what kind of people do we end up being? Like, I kind of worry with AI. It's very flattering. It's always like, yeah, like great thinking. It never tells you like, no, it never tells you no. It never tells you you're wrong. It never like, it just agrees with you all the time. And you have to like fight with it to get it to disagree with you, basically. And I know a lot of young people are finding comfort in chatting with AI. And I get it because it's like, it's very smart. Like, and it has pretty great EQ, I would say. But, people are like getting into relationships now with AI because like it only agrees with them. Like, what are you going to do when in the real world you actually have like a conflict and you need to engage in confrontation? Like, that's going to be really uncomfortable because you aren't used to it. So I don't know what that's like.
I know. It'll be an interesting world.
I mean, as long as people have siblings, I'm guessing that they're probably going to get a little exposure to it. But
yeah,
those only kids out there, I don't know. I worry about you.
Sorry, Roosevelt. Yes.
Sorry, my bad.
You're fine. I am a twin, so I very much grew up with the sibling thing, and I'm like, we're gonna do the only child thing. But you're 100% right, though. When you're living with AI, like it makes you feel so good about yourself, and you're like, this is very different. This is not accurate. Like, I'm with you. Okay, so now tell me about your experience in like your corporate career. So you mentioned your undergrad in chemistry. And just take me on this journey with you. Kind of tell me about your background.
So I got my degree in chemistry from UVA. When I graduated high school, having lived in France, I felt like I had missed out on the like very typical American kind of rah, whatever. So I felt like what I wanted in college was like Greek life, sports, so I was drawn to UVA of all places and then hated it because it was very much not my scene, like very preppy, kind of racist. Like, and I was like, whoa, I had culture shock, major culture shock. And I joined a sorority and didn't like it. That's a whole thing. My mom wanted me to go Kappa. I didn't go Kappa because I felt like the Kappa girls were bitchy. And I went for like the funny, the funny, weird girls. And I don't know. Anyway, it was not, I regretted my choice and it kind of fucked me up for a long time. Let's see. So got my degree in chemistry. I think I was a pretty decent student. Like I had a 3.2 GPA. I also had a pretty healthy social life, I would say. And when it came time to graduate, I ended up being the cliche, which I wasn't expecting, but I started interviewing for jobs that were in my field, which would be like lab positions. And oh my God, they paid like crap. They wanted me to start with like a night shift mostly. And it was very repetitive work. It was like, you're just following this process. We're just synthesizing this drug or whatever it was. And like, there were 3 different commissions that would audit your work. And like, you couldn't make mistakes. And I was like, whoa, this is not my deal. Like, I'm not built for this. I need human interaction. I need sunlight. So there was a bit of a panic, I guess, for me to find a job when I graduated. So when I actually received my degree and it was like the last day of college, I didn't have a job lined up. So my mom, again, this was one of those times where she was like, we couldn't get on the phone together because she would just like go into a tailspin about like, well, how's the job search? Like, what's going on? Like, how are you making money? And I lived in my car for 3 weeks in my like '07 Honda CRV. And like our local grocer is Harris Teeter in Virginia. So I'd get up in my car and like walk into the Harris Teeter because I was sleeping in the Harris Teeter parking lot with like all my physical belongings in my SUV. And I would apply for jobs in the coffee shop at the Harris Teeter. And my mom was just like, what the fuck are you doing? And I was fortunate enough. So I worked for this company called Epic out of Madison, and they hire almost exclusively out of college. It's a software company. It was a great gig. And fortunately, my background in chemistry, I took a couple computer science classes and I passed their very rigorous hiring process, which was really exciting. So I got the offer. I was sitting in my car in the parking lot and they called me and gave me the offer. And I was like, hell yeah. And they said, when can you start? And I was like, how long does it take me to drive there? It was like a 2-day drive. And I was like, I can start next Monday.
Okay, hold on. Let me ask you, were your parents living in Virginia or did they live somewhere else when you were going to school there?
They lived somewhere else. Like my mom was still in France and my dad was in Colorado.
Okay, so you were just like, tell me about the decision to stay in your car versus go somewhere else to find a place or go with a friend or go with a parent. Like, what was that decision?
Well, so I didn't really feel comfortable. I think I might have spent like a night or 2 on somebody's couch. But like the scary reality for me was nobody really wanted me on their couch. And I don't think that that's like a character flaw. I just think like the couches that I did sleep on, it was basically good for one night. And then they were like, sorry, I got to go work in the morning. Like, you need to get out. And so I was like, I didn't feel welcome anywhere. And I didn't want to sign a lease anywhere because I didn't know where my job was going to be. So if I couldn't commit to like a year-long lease in Virginia, because what if I was, and I ended up getting a gig in Wisconsin of all places. And I just felt confident that I would land a job. Like, I don't remember really ever worrying about not getting a job. So for me, it was temporary.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's it. So what made you not want to go and stay with your dad for a little bit while you were figuring out the job situation?
So my dad and I, it's funny, we were very estranged, I would say, for a good part of my life. I might have been the impetus for it, but like when I started going through puberty, I just got like the ick from him. And it's not like he did anything. I mean, whatever, dads are dads, but I like distanced myself from him for years. And because I was a wild child, I also was like difficult. And I think he didn't really know how to handle me. He's like not a very emotive guy. So like we were just not close. And I don't even know how many times I ended up talking to him in college, probably like on his birthday, my birthday. And when I'd go home to see him on the holidays, like I ended up partying the entire time and like barely spending any time with him. So I probably also didn't feel comfortable staying with him.
Yeah. Totally makes sense. Okay. So you got it's Epic. Is it a health record system or something? Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like now I think the world's biggest electronic medical record software. And at the time we were like supposedly like leaving the underdog status. Our CEO, she's still the CEO. The founder is to this day, Judy Faulkner, very eccentric person. But when I was hired, I was like the biggest hiring class of the company to date. And she was like, oh, we're the underdogs. But I think at that point we were like, had vastly outmaneuvered the competition. But in any case, yes, that's what it is. Sorry, I'm rambling.
No, that's great. That's amazing. I'm familiar with Epic just because Kansas City is all like health IT focused and working with my business in like a healthcare kind of space, Epic comes up a lot. So it's really cool. I was just making sure it's the same Epic, but I didn't make the connection of who the founder was. I have read a little bit about her, but she's not a very public, just a little bit.
No, not a very public figure, because Epic is privately owned, actually. And she is a billionaire, like probably a couple times over. But she lives she lives in Madison. She drives the same, like, I wouldn't say beat up, but like she drives the same, God, it's like a green Mercedes maybe, but like a pretty, it's not flashy. And she's not out there making a whole lot of noise.
She's not Elon Musking it up.
Yeah, no, she's not Elon Musking. And she's like got to be in her late 70s now, I would think. So I think there are talks internally of like, who her successor will be. But I mean, she had a really long run. Like the company was founded in 79, I want to say. So yeah.
That's amazing. Oh my gosh. Okay. So tell me about your experience moving there and starting that job and kind of where it took you.
God, it was like a total. So I refer to Epic as like professional boot camp. We're all hired out of college. They put you through several weeks of training because you have to learn the software. And then they also teach you like professional etiquette. Like one of the courses was called friendly badgering. And it was about like how to follow up on things without being annoying. So they whip you into shape because it's a consultant gig. You're customer facing, you're traveling every week. You're working 60 plus hour weeks and you're working with like a bunch of 20-year-olds. And so the company culture was very culty and like drinking the Kool-Aid. And there was a bit of a culture of like who could work the most. So people would come to work and brag about like, oh, I was up until 2 a.m. last night, or last week I logged 80 hours or whatever. But I'm really grateful for the experience. Despite like working my ass off, it taught me so much about, how to be a good professional. And I got what I really kind of needed out of it. I think I worked there for 2 years and I worked on one install for like from the day one through to the go live. So I got to see like one whole implementation end to end. I got assigned to a new project. I did that for about 4 to 5 months before I ended up leaving. But it was a great experience. I like highly recommend it. I don't know how much it's changed since then, but I think like coming right out of school, very few companies probably offer a better sort of like foundation for, what good looks like.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love the friendly badgering thing. That would have been a super helpful class for me for sure.
Like they taught us to literally put a picture of a badger in the email. It was like, and so like, and that's what I mean, like how it's culty. Like you could do that. Like that was just like, it was because we were all taught to do it. Like all you'd have to do is send a picture of a badger to your coworker and like point made. You know what I mean?
Yep. They're like, I get it.
You know that moment when you realize that you can't keep living the way that you've been living? You've probably heard several of my guests talk about that already. If that resonates with you and you're feeling like you're in that moment, you're in luck. I've created a 30-day program that's going to help you become unstuck, reconnect with your joy, reconnect with yourself, and reconnect with your values. We're going to work together to figure out your next step, your vision, and your path forward. This is an invitation for you to live the life of your dreams that truly lights you up. Visit 101waysout.com to get started.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
I wouldn't do it like out at my next company. I think I might have done it once or twice and people were like, what is this?
Right?
You're weird.
That's amazing. Okay, sorry, you're making me reflect on a lot of random corporate stuff. Tell me about where you went after that. What happened next?
The reason why I left really I wasn't unhappy per se, but I had met my now husband in Madison. And 4 months after we met, his company moved him to Chicago. And so we actually did long distance for a year where I was driving from Madison down to Chicago every weekend. And after a year, it was sort of like, what are we doing? Like, are we going to commit to this? And things had been going really well together with us. So like for me, it was kind of a no-brainer. Although it is one of those things in hindsight, when I look back, I'm like, girl, you were crazy. Like you quit your job and moved to Chicago to like be with a guy. Like what? And I'm sure that's how my mom felt too.
If you don't move for love, what do you move for? I mean, I think that's the best reason.
Right. I mean, and fortunately, finding a new job was pretty easy. This was 2016, 2017. I looked up staffing agencies in Chicago and I emailed a bunch of them. And they were all like C-suite staffing firms. Like they only placed executives. But a few of them were like, I like her chutzpah. And so they messaged me back and they were like, we can't place you because you're a fucking like junior level employee. But we know other people in like the staffing industry. And so I got a couple connections and got hooked up with this chick at Insight Global, Hala Courtney. And she just like was finding me jobs that I would interview for. And I landed a gig with Grainger. It was like a contract to hire thing. And I started like pretty much right away. I put in my notice at Epic and like, again, like the following Monday, I was starting at Grainger in Chicago.
That's fantastic. So had you moved to Chicago or did you move to Chicago with the Grainger job?
With the job.
Okay.
Because the thing about Epic is you cannot work remote. You cannot work. So like even working from home was like, you're not allowed to do it basically 5 days a week in office. And so I didn't have a choice. I had to stay there until I had something else.
That makes sense. So you moved for love, but you had your own income. You had your feet underneath you. It was, Mom, come on, you had it all together.
Well, I didn't put in my notice until I had the offer in hand. So it felt pretty safe. But I did take a pay cut and I lost benefits because as a contractor, you don't get PTO, you don't get healthcare. So I had like really shitty Obamacare insurance for like a year, basically. And my first year at Grainger, I will say, was very, very difficult. I had like none of my coworkers were my age. Everybody was like at least a decade older than me. My boss was this just like airhead. I mean, she was older, but like, oh my God, I could have done her job better than she did. And I needed more work to do. I don't even know what I did for a year. I was really unhappy, made work for myself. And ultimately, that's what allowed me to, like, somebody saw what I was doing and liked it and took me into her team because I think she knew that I was kind of dying on the vine. And the funny thing is so I accepted a role that was like a permanent position on this other woman's team. And literally the next week, they terminated my old boss. And it was just her and I. So like she didn't have a team. So like her role was just eliminated. And I feel like I kind of like sidestepped something bad. But from that point forward, things started to go a lot better for me at Grainger. And then about 6 years of my total tenure there was spent leading my own initiative that I was assigned, that I actually begged for. And that kept me really engaged and really busy for 6 years. And I was super proud of the work that I was doing. And over that time, I got like 3 different promotions, built my own team. People leadership was a really hard change for me, but it was great experience. And like, I'm super grateful for it. And I think it's what gave me the confidence that I needed to start my own business.
Yeah.
So for anybody who doesn't know, which I'm sure everybody has seen at least one Grainger commercial for the ones who get it done, but we had a massive customer service department and, handling customer requests, customer complaints, et cetera. And we had not the best internal processes for managing these requests or technology, recording them and tracking them and whatever. So my whole program was around improving the company's internal workflow management solutions. So heavily technology based, but also defining processes and procedures. And it touched like every department internally that played a role in resolving a customer request or issue. So the finance teams, sales, not just customer service, but like, I think last I counted, it was like 12 different departments within the company. It was a behemoth project and like I really cut my teeth on it, but I also made something of a reputation for myself in the company. And it could have stayed and I probably would have ended up having a very successful career there. And I'm sure we can get into the whole like why I left, but like at some point I realized like that wasn't for me for the like remainder of my life. So
Wow.
I had to move on.
Okay, well, let's talk about that. I'm curious, actually, before we get there, I just am curious about the people leadership side of things, because you mentioned that it was a challenge, like kind of stepping into that role, which I would take a pause and just say, agreed. And I think for anyone, it's a different thing. Like if you haven't done it before, there's a whole different skill set that comes along with it. And most companies just kind of throw you into it. There's no preparation. What was it like for you? And how long did you lead people at that company?
So I led people, I think, for 4 years. And I think this is typical for pretty much everybody who becomes a first-time manager. You are a high-performing individual contributor. And so obviously, because you're good at your job, you'll be good at leading people. But I wanted that. Like, I did want to become a people leader. I saw that as like something that made sense for me. But I was a hard ass because I had really high expectations. And what I think was really challenging is in the world of project management, especially leading in it, like the company didn't have a blueprint for how to lead initiatives like this. So I was to some extent like making it up as I went, but obviously I was defining these processes and procedures of how we operated as a project team along the way. But like evaluating my team members' performance it felt very personal because I was the one who was deciding what good looked like. And so I think it was really hard to set expectations because I was like, you just have to demonstrate critical thinking and like, you know, like all these skills that came naturally to me. I don't know. It was really hard. It was like every time somebody wouldn't meet my expectations, I would try to talk to them about it. And they were like, well, you know, how was I supposed to know? And I was like, well, if you just fucking thought about it, like maybe, you know, I don't know. At the same time, I was on ADD medication for I started taking ADD medication when I was in high school, but it made me a really intense person. Like I was so tightly wound because it's just like, I don't know, you get on it and you're like, it felt like a superpower, but I had no patience. I had no sense of empathy. I was just like, do the fucking work and do it good. It was really hard. Over time, you know, you get a high performer on your team and suddenly you're like, oh, okay, I can kind of see how this goes. But the first time I became a people leader, I only had one employee. So it was me and her. And again, so it was like, it felt very personal. And I was trying to give her responsibilities for work that I had been previously responsible for. So it was like, I felt like I was kind of set up for failure in hindsight. Yeah. And this was also right as the pandemic set in. So I got my first employee like maybe a month or two after we all went remote. So I was leading her remotely. I'd never even met her face to face. And so leading somebody with like zero rapport, and to make it harder, I gave her offer on a whatever day of the week it was. 2 days later, her mom passes and she's very, very close with her mother. And naturally, of course, she was like devastated and she was grieving, but she accepted the offer anyway. And it made for a very, very rocky start for us because I didn't feel comfortable sort of putting her feet to the fire or like really setting any kind of expectation. She was taking a ton of time off to grieve. And it just felt like, how can I hold this person accountable when they've got like way bigger issues at hand? And we never really recovered from that because like I just never really learned how to do it. So in hindsight, when I reflect back on all of it, I wonder if I had some of the hardest like first times at people leadership. Like I feel like there are probably other roles where it would have been a lot easier and I could have maybe learned the ropes with less variables.
For sure. I mean, it's having to take your first experience leading someone during the pandemic and then they are in that situation, I think that's incredibly hard. Plus the thing you mentioned about empathy, just based on my own personal journey and conversations that I'm having as well, mostly my own journey. I think the empathy thing, I think it's hard to have empathy or at least allow yourself to have empathy when you have the upbringing like you've had. Based on what you've shared with me, it doesn't sound like you were extended a lot of empathy or that it was modeled for you as a child. Right. And so it's probably something that feels in some way like a weakness. Yeah. And you're strong and you're trying to be strong. So that wouldn't come into the workforce. Mm-hmm. And yet I think as we go on our own journey of healing and discovery, we realize that it is so important and it's something that we all deserve to have and we deserve to give that to other people. But I think it's just when you haven't experienced it, it doesn't feel like a strength. Just my own guess based on everything you've shared.
I mean, I think it makes total sense. Like there was actually a period of time in these stage of my life where I worried that I was like autistic or something. I was like, I just don't even know if I'm capable of accessing whatever it is that I need to like connect with my employees. I don't think that's true now, but like, I don't really care about your personal life. Like, I just want you to do the work. I don't want to connect with you. And when we all got back into the office and I hired people, like I'd had learned to trust my gut in hiring. And like I got some people on my team who I did relate to, and it becomes a lot more organic. But in those early days, I was like, I mean, my mom's still around. Like, I can't really relate to what it's like to losing your mother. And I'm trying to be your boss at the same time. Like, it was tough.
Oh, yeah. How can you? It's impossible. It is hard. Tell me about what made you decide to leave the corporate environment and go out on your own.
Like I said, when I was growing up, entrepreneurship wasn't really discussed in my house. I honestly like knew what that word was for a very, very long time. It didn't start necessarily as I want to be an entrepreneur. What it actually more so started as was I don't want to be here anymore. And there's probably a separate story that I could tell about like why Zoomies specifically, but just focusing on like why I made the jump at all.
Yeah.
I would say, I think it actually started with there was a Vyvanse shortage. There was a national shortage for my ADHD medication. And there were several months where I just couldn't get my prescription filled. And so I was unmedicated for like several months, like 2 or 3 months. And like I kind of woke up. I was like, oh, I don't know if I'm like I'm not really engaged in this anymore. I want to like relax more. I don't like feeling as intense as I used to feel. Like I feel better. I actually want to eat lunch. You know, I'm like, I'm not having tension headaches at 5 p.m. anymore. So I was kind of like, you know, that movie, like Welcome to Pleasantville, where like everything's black and white and then things started to become color. Like that's kind of what my life felt like at that point, where I was like, whoa, like I had been so lasered in on the job. Like every day was like about the job. And I was like stressed and I was getting like pinched nerves that like I suffered from for months. Like I was underweight. I was drinking heavily. I didn't realize that I was like in this fucking nasty cycle. And then when I stopped taking the medication, I was like, whoa, like, and so the medication like became available again. And I just decided like, I'm not going back on it. And that started like an 8-month kind of awakening for me. And by the end of 8 months, my husband and I were on a walk. We were walking our dogs one morning. And I looked at him and I said, I'm not happy. And like, and I was like, not with us. Like, I'm happy. I love this. But like at work, like, I don't want to do it. I was sitting on the toilet in the office one day. And I don't know why this occurred to me, but I did the math on my phone. Yes, I had my phone in the bathroom. I did the math of how many more years I had before retiring. And it was like 40 something years. And I was,
oh God.
In that moment, I was like, fuck that. Nope. Like what? 40 more years of this? Like, and I think at that point I had, I don't know, 7 years under my belt. So this was even before the awakening, I guess. I don't know the timeline, but basically, I turned to my husband. I said, I'm not happy. I don't see myself retiring however many years from now, having done the same shit every day. You know, obviously, I would have probably climbed the ladder or whatever, but like, I didn't want to walk into that building every day for the next 40 years. And I just didn't like how much clarity there was between me and the rest of my life. I was like, I can see it. And that's not what I want. And my husband's the fucking best. He's in sales. So he's got like kind of an entrepreneur brain. He's a fucking enigma. If you knew his parents, I love his parents, but he is like so different from them in a good way. Like he's crazy. But he was like, quit, just quit. He was like,
no questions, no pushback.
He was like, quit tomorrow. And he was like, you can start Zoomies. Cause like that had been something we'd been talking about for a couple of years at that point. And I think he was more excited than I was. He was like, yeah, like fucking let's go. So we actually shook hands on this walk that one Saturday morning. We were like, we made a pact that was like, come September, and I think this was March. It was come September, you're going to be no longer employed at Grainger and you're going to be working on Zoomies. And I actually quit in August. So like a month earlier. And the 4 months between that pact and when I actually left were like some of the hardest months of my life because I told my company I was planning on leaving and they were like, because I wasn't ready to leave. I actually had some stock that was due to vest and like I needed more time to get comfortable with the financial implications of it. I mean, that's kind of the story of how it went. Like, I don't know if I could have done it without Matt, my husband, and without quitting Vyvanse. Like, I think those were two really big moments.
Yeah. Wow. That's so interesting. Thank you for sharing your story. And it really is unique. You're the first person that I've met, not the first person that I've met that has had like the medication journey. Many people have, but the change for you where it's like, oh my gosh, there's a whole world that I'm not even seeing because my brain is being trained a certain way because of medication is so interesting.
Yeah.
I love that you were able to get off of it and discover a new path for yourself and that you have a partner that's willing to support you, which is what we all should have, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that's fantastic.
And I'm used to making good money. So like
Yeah.
financially,
Oh, yeah.
it's been a change. Like my mom ingrained in me hard growing up, like never be dependent on a man. I think she had seen, I don't know if it was in her mom necessarily, but in her sister, my aunt, who was in like a not so great relationship with her ex-husband. And like my mom just had all these examples of marginalized women who like were under the thumb of their husband, didn't have the financial means to get out. So I was raised like desperately afraid of getting pregnant and desperately afraid of like needing to depend on a man. Like I feel like those were the two things that were like drilled into me. I'm still afraid of getting pregnant to this day. I still feel like I'm 16, but I am 100% financially dependent on my husband right now. And that was like a really uncomfortable change for me. And it's still difficult because there are things like I used to buy for myself. Now I feel like I'd have to go ask him. And I don't think that I would even like, I have the credit card. I could make the expense, but I don't know. I'm doing a lot of money work now because money always came to me really easily. And then I quit and it was like money dried up. And it was like, suddenly I had like money issues and like money scarcity and like needed to work on my mindset. But I feel like I am turning a corner in that page of my life. But for 12 months, it was like, I'm not making any money right now. And I'm just spending money. And this is weird.
It is weird. It is such a huge and difficult transition. But what you said about the money thing makes a ton of sense to me. And I was in a similar situation when I left my corporate gig to start, really not to start Leva, because I had started Leva, which is my business, but to focus on it full time. And it was really difficult because I personally grew up without very much money. Our parents struggled. My parents, I'm a twin, right? Our parents struggled so much trying to make ends meet, and all the fights were about money. So when I was able to get a good job and then move up in my career, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm never, ever going back to that. That's a huge fear. A huge fear for me is I'm never going to live in that way again. And so I went from this like really fabulous job where I'm making all this money. And at the time I'm like, I can do this. I'm going to go all in. It's going to be amazing. But I was also so afraid because of that, not bringing in the money. Like for some reason, there was like a massive disconnect between my husband still has a great job and I now have all the like very good savings, very good retirement plan. Like everything is great, but I still felt this fear of lack.
Yeah.
So, it has taken, I was exactly what you said, when you're like, oh, but all the stuff I would do for myself. Now I feel like I need to ask my husband. And it's a whole different thing. 100% understand exactly what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, meanwhile, he's like re-gripping his golf clubs. And I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, we're living hand to mouth right now. And he's like, no, we're not. Like, what are you saying? Like, we still go out to dinner. I'm like, so I have to and I have a life coach. And for anybody who like has any kind of struggle on a regular basis with money, your job, whatever, I highly recommend life coaches. Shout out Tracy Baranowskis. She's great. Yeah. Like there was a gap between how I felt about money and like what my real financial situation was. Like it's never that dire. I mean, now I'm leveraging things to start this business. So like there's always the chance that I could lose my house. I could whatever, but like also we'll be okay. Like,
No,
but,
you're so right.
Yeah. Like
you're so right.
I think we're also trained not to dip into our savings. Like it's like a bad thing. And I've not only dipped into my savings, but the liquid assets that I had set aside for a rainy day are basically depleted at this point. When I was embarking on this journey, my life coach was like, well, what is the money for? And I'm like an emergency? And she's like, well, what's this? Like, you don't want to live this life. Like, you need to get out. So, like, spend the money. And it was such an uncomfortable thing to, like, do.
Yeah. Anything else that you did to prepare for the exodus from your corporate experience?
No, I didn't prepare at all. Like, it was, I knew that I wanted to work long enough to get the stock and pay off some credit card bills. I was trying to save money, but my husband, and I think, so he grew up with very little means as well. And so I think maybe like you is like, I never want to be there again. But he's like, money's meant to be spent. Like he wants to enjoy it while he has it. I don't think it's like as soon as it hits my pocket, I have to spend it kind of thing. Because I know that's like a different kind of damage. But long story short, my husband did not want to start scrimping, like leading up to my leaving of the job. He was like, you're not making this move so that we can like shrink ourselves. And so as much as I wanted to save more money, we didn't. And so, no, we didn't prepare. We didn't prepare at all. I was like, pull the ripcord. We're doing it. We'll figure it out.
Yeah. So in some way you waited. You prepared by waiting for your stock to vest. That's a little bit, but not like I've talked to some people, one unique human being who had a massive plan they put together over 3 years. So I'm like, wow, that is the biggest preparation that I have heard. So yeah, very different. But some people are just like, no, I'm gone. I'm done.
I mean, my life coach, she was just like, if you're constantly waiting for like some sort of moment for it to be okay, you're never going to do it. And so whether that was like irresponsible guidance or not, like I listened to it because I was like, she's right. You know, who's the founder of Facebook? That weird
Zuckerberg.
Guy? Zuckerberg. He said, if I knew how to build Facebook, I would have never built Facebook.
100%.
So I was like, you just got to start. Like, we're just going to take one step and then another and then another and then another. Yeah.
Yes. I love that. What is one thing that you wish you had known before you left?
It certainly wouldn't be anything about how hard it was going to be. And I like, honestly, I've grown a lot. It's been challenging, but in good ways. Like it's not like I wake up and cry every day. I feel like I'm being challenged in a way that feels good to me, but I certainly wouldn't have wanted to know what was going to be hard. Like when I went into my ayahuasca retreat, I didn't do any research. I didn't know what the fuck I was getting into. And I'm kind of glad I didn't, because I think if I'd read about other people's experiences, it would have scared me. So with this decision to leave, I probably wouldn't have wanted to know any of the bad stuff because it might have deterred me. I guess I probably would have wanted to know just how good it could feel. Because there are some times where like I feel so much excitement, like it like gets all balled up in my chest and it like almost feels like anxiety, but I know it's like exuberance for life. And I never used to feel that. I mean, not that I'm aware of. And I wish I would have known just how like I quit alcohol as a result of this. Like, I guess I would have had more confidence if I'd known a year from now, even though like I'm still working, like I still don't even have an open business, like how I'd be thriving.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that. I don't know if this is true. I need to look into it more. A side note on the alcohol thing. I was reading that alcohol was actually used in a lot of ways to slaves / lower class people / et cetera, and women and all that, like just to kind of keep people in their like down. Mm-hmm. Because to your point, like when life is good, you're like, hey, I don't really need to drink. Life is good. Yeah. It's kind of an interesting. So when you mentioning that, I was like, oh, connecting dots in my brain.
So my husband is like something of a conspiracy theorist. I probably wouldn't allow him to speak on all of his beliefs publicly because it would be embarrassing. But like, he's the kind of guy, he's like, sunscreen is like a corporate whatever because vitamin D makes us feel good. And like, if we're not getting our vitamin D, like he's like all in on the we're sheeple train. And like, yes, alcohol is one of those things that I think keeps us low vibration.
Yeah. That's interesting. I hadn't heard about I've never heard the sunscreen thing. I'm like, oh, but our skin, but it is so good for us. Like vitamin D is so critically good for us. It's one of the things that it actually like it lengthens our lives.
I mean, he like won't wear sunglasses because he's like, it ruins our circadian rhythm. Like we should be letting like the sun into our eyes. Like he's a weirdo, but yeah.
That's cool though. We need that sometimes in our lives. A little bit of weird.
Grosses. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Were you scared when you made the leap?
I was like chomping at the bit, honestly, because it had been such like those 4 months between I had basically made the decision. I mean, yes, there was definitely like a lot of second guessing. You know, I was like, is this crazy? And a lot of it was mostly other people's opinions kind of infecting my conviction. So I really had to work on like kind of protecting my conviction, because one conversation with my mom, you know, and she just like bust the house of cards and I'd be like, oh my God, what am I doing? But I wasn't really that scared. I was excited because it felt like jumping off a cliff. I'm more excited about the unknown than I am the known.
Yeah. I love that. That's amazing. And it's so true. The people that are in your life, they're critical because the voices matter. What you hear matters. How has your income changed and what has that meant for you?
Yeah. I mean, I wish that the answer was like, I'm a millionaire now. I would say I used to go from making, I made like 200K, I think, in my last year of work to basically zero. So I'm not making an income right now. I've sold a couple pieces of art. I've made like some money has come in, but I've gotten investor money. I've gotten an SBA loan. So like money is coming to me. It's just not maybe in the way that I would expect. And I think that that's important because it's sort of opening my perspective on like what it means to have abundance and like to have money come in. But I certainly look forward to the day when like I actually have money in my bank that I can spend on things that I want.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought it's so cool too, because you are an artist. So I love that you mentioned selling your artwork.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, your background, that is so cool.
Thank you.
So cool. All right. So tell me, like, what is your ultimate vision for your life?
I love that question. And I think this is an exercise that everybody should do where you start by identifying your core values. Like, what are the things that are truly important to you? And I think when you sit down and think about it, you might be surprised by what comes out. But for me, things like freedom, authenticity, like those are probably like pinnacle for me. I'm something of a rebel. So like in my spirit, it's important that I have like, I'm autonomous. But I want a life of leisure. I want a life where I get to choose what I do every day. I don't like obligation. I don't like heavy responsibility. And I think that that's a mindset, to be fair. But I like building community. I like being needed. I want to travel. I want to deepen my spiritual practices. I want to spend more time at retreats and doing maybe some high octane stuff. I want to learn how to fly. Right? I kind of want to live maybe that influencer lifestyle a little bit more. But right now, like building something that's mine, like Zoomies, it's the only path forward right now. It's such I'm passionate about it. I do worry, like, just to be totally transparent, like, I worry that I'm creating something that will, like, drain me of all my life forces. Like, what if I build this thing and it's like a monster and I end up actually unhappy with what I've created? But in conversations with many, many wise people, they say, as long as you wake up every day and make decisions that are in alignment with your joy, you will build a life that is in alignment with your joy. So if you don't want to work 80-hour days, don't make decisions that will lead to that. Like, don't work 80-hour days because like that'll just become a thing. So long story short, I want to travel. I want nice things. I want to feel at ease. And I want to feel proud of what I've, given back.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. That makes a lot of sense too. And your top two values are very similar to mine. So that totally makes sense to me. Like, that makes sense why it's so easy to talk to you.
As soon as we got on the phone for the first time, I was like, yup.
Yeah.
I can feel there's like an energy match here. Yeah.
Yes. I love it. I am going to send you a retreat, by the way, that I'm going to at the end of September. So if it happens to work out, I'll send you more details.
Please do.
I love that you said that too, because that is one of my goals for this. The most recent vision that I created for myself does have that in it as well. So I'm like, yay.
Really? I love that.
Yes. No kidding. Okay. If you had to choose between happiness or success, which would you choose? And has it changed over time?
It definitely has. I would say with the upbringing that I had, not just what my parents instilled in me, but what I saw in the rich kids in high school. I wanted to be ultra wealthy. I wanted fuck you money. And that's what I thought success was. And because of the way my parents instilled money beliefs, like I believed the only way to have that was to work hard, was through hard work. So now, the pendulum has swung, like happiness all the way, but like, what is my definition of success now? It's probably like being happy, right? So would I want to be living barefoot on the street and like deliriously happy? I feel like there's probably some mental, like, I think you probably need some therapy or some help at that point. So like, as long as I have my wits about me, sorry, I feel like I've lost the thread here. Yeah, I'd rather be.
Yeah, dude, that's great. I like that you pushed it to the extreme.
I feel like that's the only way I feel good about like big scary decisions. Is like I have to think about what's worst case scenario and like, am I okay with that? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, if your worst case scenario is barefoot on the street but deliriously happy, it could be worse.
It could be worse. I mean, like barefoot on the street and miserable. Like I wouldn't like that. But I think as long as you practice mindfulness and like, I don't know, continue to see the good in humanity, like I just believe that things will be okay. Like I think people's misery is more a byproduct of their own mindset than any external factor.
Absolutely. And I think so much of what we consume, because I know for sure when I take a break from knowing about the bad things in the world and I focus more on the good things in the world, it is such a better way to live. And it's so hard sometimes, but it's such a better way to live.
So when I was at my ayahuasca retreat, one of the nights I was really, really struggling. Like I was just battling with this like feeling bad and like trying to find peace and finding peace for a second. And then like the bubble bursts and then I'm like uncomfortable again. And like just, I don't even know, like 10-second cycles for like 7 hours on end. And the shaman came over and I was talking to her and I was like struggling and I'm battling. And she was like, you have a commitment to suffering that I think you need to like she was like, you don't have to. Like, it's that simple. You can choose to like be at peace. Like you can choose the path of least resistance. Like it doesn't have to be hard. I feel like you have to do a lot of work for that to actually embody that, you know, because superficially you're like, oh yeah, like that sounds great. But I don't know. I've done a lot of thinking about that and it basically gave me permission to like be a little bit more at ease with what is. I don't know.
It's permission to actually relax maybe and actually enjoy your life a little bit more.
Yeah.
That's a tough one.
Being a martyr like what's it for?
Yeah. Yeah.
Truly.
That's a great point. What's the most liberating decision that you've made since you left your corporate job that you would have never made otherwise?
So I think that it's actually a perfect connector because this is exactly where I wanted to be when I was thinking about this question earlier. Because it's not like some big decision that I made. Like it's not something that I chose to do or whatever. It's actually in the small decisions every day to be okay with who I am and what I do. That's the most liberating thing. And it's scary because like going back to the conversation about like trusting yourself, like I have some really crunchy friends who I actually met at this ayahuasca retreat. They're beautiful girls. And they're off the deep end in this like spirituality stuff, but they're like, everything you do is perfection. Even like if you chose to wake up that day and like rot on the couch scrolling Instagram, like it's perfection. And so deciding that like, oh, I didn't follow up with that investor and fuck, I probably ruined it. And like, it's okay. Like you're perfect as you are. And like, it's maybe not even a mistake. Like maybe not following with that investor, like actually was the best thing for you. I don't know. But like, I struggled in the corporate setting because I would feel like I was doing a great job. And then I would sit down for my biannual review with my boss. And I think it's expected that with the positive review comes some constructive feedback, right? Even Steph Curry like gets coaching, but it always made me feel bad. Like it always, I couldn't hear the good. All I heard was like, here's what you need to focus on. And I feel like I'm now in this kind of space where like, I think that's bullshit. I don't know. Like, and maybe that's just choosing to ignore but like I'm growing in ways that feel good to me. And like having somebody externally tell me like, you need to be more organizationally savvy. Like, no, I don't. I'm good.
Yeah.
It works for me. So
yeah.
It's like the expectation that, you know, but all it really is like it's my opinion of what I think you need to be doing differently. And maybe in a corporate setting, it's different. Maybe when I do have my business and I have my team members, maybe I'll feel differently about it. But right now in my journey of like being my own boss, I just want to accept me as I am because I feel way more happy when I'm not beating myself up and like just accepting it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Last question. What is saving your life right now?
What's saving my life right now? What's saving my life right now? I feel like more grand scheme answer would be my spirituality, like my mindfulness practices. Like that's what keeps me sane. I think 4 years ago, medicated Devon like couldn't do what I'm doing right now because I would have been too brittle. And I think it's all of this work that allows me to just like be more accepting of what is. Like you don't always know whether what's happening right now. What's the it's like a parable about like Chinese farmer's son where he like breaks his leg and everybody's like, oh no, like he broke his leg. This is terrible. And then the next day, the king's like army comes through town and like drafts a bunch of young men into the army. And he doesn't get drafted because he's injured. And then they're like, yay, like what a great. So it kind of feels like that every day where like something that's maybe seems like not so good. Like I just am like, well, 3 months from now, I might be like pumped that this happened because it just paved the way for something else. So I would say that's saving my life. It's just keeping me sane. But like more micro level with Zoomies, like I just got 3 investors and an SBA loan approved. And I'm about to sign a lease on a building, which were like all my biggest, like I've spent the past year working towards these milestones and like they're finally happening. And it's breathing new life into me because I'm like, yes, like on to the next thing. If I had to keep doing this for another year, I could, but I'd rather not. So
Yeah.
Fantastic. Oh my God. Congratulations. I
Thank
love that.
you.
We definitely need to do a follow-up about Zoomies.
Yes.
Maybe it could be like, well, I don't know if you're going to have the time, but maybe once the lease is signed and it's like, oh, this thing has happened or something, we'll figure out the timing, but it would be great. Okay. If people want to find you and follow more about your journey, what's the best way?
My online presence is entirely wrapped up in my business. So you can learn more about Zoomies, Chicago's like first indoor dog park. It's hopefully going to become America's indoor dog park, maybe the world's indoor dog park. But ZoomiesChicago.com is our website. All of our social handles are at Zoomies Chicago. So check us out.
Ah, fantastic. I love it so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh my gosh. Hi, guys. You're still here. Just kidding. I hope you loved Devon's story. It is really cool. You guys have got to check out Devon's social media accounts and see the progress that's coming along for Zoomies. She is demolishing the interior of the brand new space that they just acquired. And man, they are getting ready to launch summer 2026. Zoomies is going to be open. If you're in the Chicagoland area or passing through, I highly recommend you check it out. And I hope that you have a wonderful week and I'll talk to you next week. Until then, go rewrite the rules.